You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 13th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio.
Are China, Russia, Iran and North Korea really all on the same side? Why Germany is unshackling its spies, and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt makes like her name. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Nina Dos Santos and John Everard will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll find out why the recognition of UNESCO's World Heritage Committee is not necessarily an unalloyed boon. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and I am joined today by John Everard, former British ambassador to Belarus, Uruguay and North Korea, and Nina Dos Santos, international broadcast correspondent, former CNN Europe editor. Hello to you both.
Hello there.
Hello.
Nina, first of all, you have accidentally gleaned some insight into what becomes of former prime ministers of the United Kingdom.
Well, this is what happens to you if you've been in the news business sort of 20 years. You go on holiday on the first day and you run into the story, who's also running away from the story themselves. In my case, I was heading down a blind alley, no pun intended, in the south of France, in the Luberon, and ran into a rather panicked-looking Keir Starmer head first.
Did he look panicked before he saw you, or was...
I don't know, there's a prospect of the blind alley, or the fact he had to turn right or left. I don't know.
Yeah, the metaphors are rather writing themselves at this point. I mean, apart from that, how is it as a place to visit?
Look, it was lovely. It's part of the world I know well, but I must say the heat was just unbelievable. And obviously today I think it's 36 degrees Celsius in London, and we're feeling it here as well. Mosquitoes are pretty ferocious. I don't know whether the former Prime Minister had an issue with that, but I certainly did.
Well, if he's tuning in, perhaps he could let us know. John, you have been taking advantage of the conditions. You descend from the seaside.
I've been to the seaside, exactly. I'm quite
British seaside.
The British seaside, the Norfolk coast, is one of the world's great hidden gems. And quite unashamedly, I've done nothing intellectual, whatever, and nothing strenuous. I've been lying on beaches, soaking up the sun. Yes, I know, it's not good for me. I've been looking at crabs and rock pools. I've been going on nice walks over cliff tops, and I've been building sandcastles. I mean, what's not to like?
Which bit of the British seaside was this? There's a lot of it.
Cromer, the Norfolk coast.
Okay, and what's
kilometres of sand beach?
Measured against most people's stereotypical images of the British seaside town, does it have a dilapidated pier and mini golf and so forth, or not?
It has a pier, not dilapidated, in very good condition, with an end-of-pier show, which is actually rather good, if you like end-of-pier shows, which I grant to you is an acquired taste. And lots and lots of ice cream stalls, plenty of candy floss, and yes, it has a mini golf. We won't going to get away without that.
Well, we will start with North Korea, which has once again been annoying the marine life of the Sea of Japan. A ballistic missile launch widely interpreted as a performative harumph ahead of the imminent Freedom Shield exercise, an annual joint venture between the militaries of South Korea and the United States, the 2026 iteration of which begins on Monday. More broadly, excitable analysts are getting excited about a new multinational acronym from the people who bought you bricks, pigs, mint, Timby and civets. Meet Crink, specifically China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, also known as the United States' next four wars. John, this is very much your former bailiwick. The launch in itself, is that a big whoop at this point, or does everybody assume that in the days leading up to Freedom Shield, the North Koreans will let a few go?
Yes, they will always symbolically launch something just to annoy people before any big joint exercise. Is the launch more significant beyond that? Quite possibly. The North Koreans have been uncharacteristically quiet about what they've done. It wasn't a launch, it was two launches in quick succession. And the experts reckon one of two things has happened. Either something went wrong and the North Koreans have gone all quiet, or that they're saving up the launches, and on a high day or a holy day they'll announce that they've conducted this great series of fantastically successful tests that can decimate the entire United States within 9 seconds. We'll have to see.
I just want to follow it up quickly, John, about the other side of this, i.e. Freedom Shield. Obviously, it happens every year, has done for a while, but Is it especially important right now that the United States is turning up with some apparent degree of enthusiasm, because there has been a lot of concern among the people who thought of themselves as the United States allies as to whether the United States is really still all that interested?
Yes, of course. Quite apart from the operational need to make sure that these two sets of armed forces can work together effectively against a common threat, there's deep symbolism. South Korea, of course, has been toying with the possibility of developing its own nuclear weapons over the last few years. I think that debate is ebbing a bit now. But nevertheless, I think it's important, both in Washington and in Seoul, that the United States demonstrates that it's serious about conventional joint deterrence.
Nina, we should talk about Crink, and I'm going to warn you both now that there will very, very shortly be a quiz of sorts about some of those other international acronyms. How well does anybody remember which countries comprise them? But Crink, are you excited for Crink? Is this the sort of thing that when you were still covering Europe for CNN would have had you go, we must do a big thing on Crink?
Well, before I joined CNN, I remember being at Bloomberg Television when they coined the acronym BRICS. So, it always puts a smile on people's faces, but obviously there's some really serious military posturing, as John was just saying before, that accompanies all of this. To be honest with you, the word Crink makes me think of the late Donald Rumsfeld, who obviously didn't he coin the axis of evil?
That was David Frum, I think, George W. Bush's speechwriter.
Right, that's it, okay. I attribute it to the wrong person, but probably also delivered by David Rumsfeld. We remember him for all of his quotes about the known unknowns, and clearly I didn't know that one. But this has more sort of been dubbed the axis of upheaval, hasn't it? It's been...
That's good.
Thank you. There you go. Maybe I need to be somebody's speechwriter. But I've got a second career coming. But I think the thing is obviously these countries have been collectively helping each other in military matters ever since the first Gulf War, haven't they, John? I mean, there's been sort of exchange of key weaponry, dual-use technology. The crucial thing is that a lot of that went through Russia first, but then now, obviously, because Russia has, since the onset of the Ukraine war, become this sort of pariah state and, is subject to sanctions, it's having to come from all these other partners, like, for instance, China and also North Korea. So the war in Ukraine has kind of shone some emphasis on this collective action that they've had for years and given it a little bit more of a sort of official format. But the reality is it's kind of always been there, hasn't it, John?
Yes, it's always been there, but it's grown quite a lot. There's a lot more interaction going on between these countries than there was a couple of decades ago. The sharpest uptick has been between Russia and North Korea, with the Russians discovering shock horror that they're short of pretty much everything and having to go cap in hand to North Korea of all countries, and ask for help. The North Koreans, of course, cock a hoop, named exorbitant prices for the Russians to cough up in exchange for men, huge numbers of shells, missiles, and even complete artillery batteries. The axis of upheaval, the thing is, it's not. I mean, Russia and North Korea do upheaval, so does Iran, what's left of it. China doesn't, and China is quite clearly the senior partner in all of this. China believes, rightly or wrongly, that in a stable world, in a status quo, it is going to come out on top, and it's looking for stability. And it really, really doesn't like what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and it is really unhappy that North Korea is helping it. It tolerates these things because it's not going to stick its oar in. But there's not a lot of common objective there. And
it's obviously not a pariah state in the way that the others are. It's an enormous economy, as you were saying before. It's sort of very much the senior partner, cracks the whip to which the others have to dance. But the other thing I would say is that the Iran war has shown the transactional and nature and fragility of this kind of alliance, hasn't it? Because the backup hasn't been as quickly forthcoming as it has been during the Ukraine war.
It hasn't been forthcoming at all. I mean, what has Russia or China ever done to help Iran? In fact, I mean, China has helped Russia quite a lot through back doors, financed, dual-use technology and so on. China has steadfastly refused to go any further and is almost certainly done the same with Iran, although we don't know as much about China-Iran interactions as we do about China-Russia interactions. And yes, China very much the senior partner, we both said that now, but also there's a question of presentation here. Russia has behaved simply appallingly. I mean, breaking every international rule you can think of, attacking a neighbouring state, pursuing a blood-stained war for years on end. China, please, I'm not carrying a candle for China. I fully recognise its human rights abuses, but it hasn't actually invaded anybody for quite a long time now. It rattles its sabre and sort of says the most disobliging things. But compared to Russian behaviour, it looks almost good.
We did want to get into a bit of this culture of multinational acronyms as to whether they actually enlarge our understanding of anything and whether any of them have legs. BRICS obviously does. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and actually 5 other countries have now joined that, though they have not expanded the acronym accordingly, rather disappointingly. I am going to quiz you on a couple of the others, and we do have, to set that up, some annoying quiz music. I told you it was annoying. I hadn't been told there were electric drums involved. Anyway, there have been others. Nina, I'm going to start with you because you may have an advantage here because this may have overlapped with your time on the Europe beat. Can you name the 4 countries in pigs?
Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain.
3 out of 4. Italy, not Ireland. Although there may be
I lived there for years.
There may be a breakaway pigs that I don't know about. Okay, John. Civets.
Pass. No idea.
Come on. Really?
C-I-V-E-T, right?
Yeah, C-I-V-E-T-S. It was a whole thing for about 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's try. China, India, Venezuela, Estonia, Tanzania, and the Seychelles.
No, zero for 6, John. Not even close.
You get a visa to this.
Yeah. Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa. What they were supposed to have in common, I have not the least comprehension. Nina, then, okay, a tricky 6-hander for you as well. Benivum. B-E-N-I-V-M. Again, I've no idea who thought this was.
B-E-N-I-V-M. Okay. Belgium?
No.
There we go. Right. Okay. No point in carrying on.
No, literally not. We would have
Put me
been
out of my misery.
Yeah, it was Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Mexico. Again, not a clue what that was supposed to be all about. And finally, John, for you, a fairly straightforward one: Mint.
M-I-N-T?
Which were the 4 mint countries?
Oh, well, that's easy.
Yeah.
That's Mozambique, Ireland, Norway, and Tuvalu.
No, surprisingly.
Did I get that wrong?
What do they have in common?
It was Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And because of John's frankly appalling refusal to take any of that even slightly seriously, Nina, you win.
Oh, thank you. Great.
There is-
I thought you were going to ask me what OPEC was now that it's, people are leaving it.
No, your prize you just had. It's a brief round of applause from the former ambassador to North Korea.
He's a diplomat for once.
Exactly. Christy, we don't need the annoying music anymore. I know you're enjoying it, but that's just me letting a little light in on the magic there and addressing the production booth. Let's move along. Specifically to Germany, whose spooks are to have their leashes lengthened and or loosened somewhat. Germany's government has approved a draft law which, if it gets through Parliament unscathed, will allow Germany's foreign and domestic intelligence services to operate in a fashion more or less similar to their peers. Germany, for obvious historical reasons, is somewhat squeamish about the projection of power overseas and the empowering of anything secret policey at home, and has generally confined its intelligence services to the gathering and analysis of information. The case for this proposed shift to a more proactive stance has recently been made in part by a couple of recent terror attacks, one of them by a known Islamist, the other by a possibly Russian drone. John, in a general scheme of things, measured against, for example, broadly comparable countries like France, the United Kingdom, etc., how restrained have Germany's spies been?
They've been very restrained. For two big reasons. Firstly, constitutionally, all they were ever allowed to do was to compile information. The BND was, in fact, one of Germany's largest, completely pointless libraries. The second reason is that they're also completely useless. I mean, one thing that doesn't come out of the media coverage is that BND is the direct descendant of a noble line starting with the Keystone Cops and going through the Pink Panther. And if you want the BND to be an effective espionage force, you would have to equip its staff with basic espionage skills like learning how to dress yourself in the morning and working out which day of the week it is. To actually get up there with the other European espionage agencies, some of which are hard hitters and very serious, the BND is going to have a complete human resources clear out. It's been used as a kind of human dustbin by the federal government for far too long. And if it's going to achieve any of these goals, it's got to get good people in. And attracting those people in to an organisation which for a long time has been a walking joke is frankly not going to be easy.
Well, from the easier said than done file then, Nina, Germany's Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt has said that what they seek to do is turn our intelligence services into genuine secret services. John, stifle that chortle. What is the difference there, though, do we think?
Well, I'm not an intelligence specialist. I have never been a diplomat or a member of government, but I suppose my observation...
You sound ideally qualified.
but being a former journalist, of course, I comment on everything and claim I know best, which I don't. I think the observation I would make is that obviously, Merz's centre-right and centre-left coalition government is extremely unpopular. Germany's contending with the fact that, its kind of economic miracle is coming to an end. The Cold War no longer runs right through West and East Germany. It runs... east of its territory in Ukraine, and Germany's the next big target for Russia, and it's been having to deal with things like, explosives being found in packages in Leipzig and former East Germany, really dangerous stuff, drones, etc., etc. And what they probably trying to signal here is that they're going to do something about it and turn this, or at least they want to signal that they want to turn it from an intelligence gathering service, as John was just saying before, into defence. Because I suppose the problem is if you're saying to young Germans, you've got to be ready to potentially be conscripted if we ever get attacked, or at least to be ready to help your country, if the intelligence services aren't the first line of defence, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
Do you think then, just to follow that up, Nina, there is an element here, you refer to Chancellor Friedrich Merz's chronic unpopularity. Is this an attempt to be seen to be not floundering, an attempt to be doing something decisive, affecting a necessary reform, etc.? And I guess if you're affecting reforms in the Secret Service, nobody's ever going to know whether you've actually done it or not. Well,
unless you talk about it, which in some cases is when politicians actually don't do anything about it, is another observation, I suppose, journalists sometimes make. It's also a massive drain on resources. It's an enormous bureaucracy at a time when people in Germany are complaining that their trains are 5 hours late, that, infrastructure is crumbling, that the healthcare system, that you could get an appointment at lightning speed 5-10 years ago, doesn't even pick up the phone. And so this enormous institution, if it's not actually nimble and up to speed, obviously is a drain on resources, and I think they're trying to signal they're doing something. Also, at a time when Germany's under this government and previous governments having to pivot and becoming more comfortable with the idea of being more active in defence, because listening to people, obviously, in Germany is a very sensitive topic because of the history of the Stasi.
John, Nina alluded there to the apparent drone attack on Leipzig airport, which occurred within the last week or so. There are, of course, any number of other instances of hybrid/nuisance threats or actions being perpetrated against Germany. Given the weaknesses of the German intelligence service that you mentioned earlier, if you are a Russian spook, does Germany strike you as the obvious weak point? If you're trying to sow confusion, division, general bewilderment in Europe, is Germany the country you'd pick on?
Yes, that you've come straight to the point. Germany is a sitting duck. It is vulnerable to information attack. I said its intelligence service is something of a joke. It's going to need thorough reform. And the Russians know this. And, of course, Germany historically has been an enemy of Russia. The Great Patriotic War was fought against Nazi Germany, which means that psychologically, for most Russians, it becomes the obvious target. The Germans are deeply conscious of this, hence the scramble to do something. I say scramble. We talked as if this was actually invented by Merz. We're looking here at a constitutional change in Germany. It's taken them ages to get these documents ready. This started quite soon after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's taken years to produce these changes. The fact that it's come out under Merz is almost coincidence.
Well, to Washington, D.C. now, currently abuzz with speculation about who will replace Karoline Leavitt as White House press secretary. Leavitt, who only recently returned to the role after having her second child, has announced that she will go at the end of this month in order to spend more time with her family. Although someone in her line of work should understand to spend more time with my family is usually understood as a euphemism for I do not wish to be standing in close proximity to this ticking parcel when it goes off. Here is some of what we will have to learn to live without.
Wages will go up and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press.
So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Why was Renee Good unfortunately and tragically killed?
Are you asking me my opinion? Because an ICE agent acted recklessly and killed it unjustifiably.
Oh, okay. So you're a biased reporter with a left-wing opinion.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah, because you're a left-wing hack. You're not a reporter. You're posing in this room as a journalist.
Nina, as the actual professional journalist at this table, how do you assess her performance behind the lectern?
So obviously, Karoline Leavitt was the youngest ever press secretary that I think we've seen in the White House, and she was really fierce, as you could hear there, also to the point of being unnecessarily chiding, probably.
Brusque, I think you could say.
Okay, if you want to put it that way. But I would say that that's obviously something that over the two Trump administrations has been a feature of, his administrations. He's deliberately picked and selected people who are going to have this sort of combative relationship with the press because it feeds directly into his own domestic politics, which is, I'm the underdog, or has been. That's how, when he was first elected back in 2016, he pitched himself as kind of the business person, the underdog, not the establishment. It's a playbook we've since seen replicated by other people around the world quite successfully. And, obviously there's going to be a lot of focus on her because she's leaving 20 months after starting the job because she's had 2 young children. And there'll probably be a lot of people focusing on she wants to step down to spend more time, dealing with the balancing motherhood and career, as many women around the world have too. But I actually think she's probably going to be she's going to be a significant force behind the scenes as well, or some kind of big surrogate on the airwaves for Donald Trump from here. This probably won't be the last we'll hear of her, I suspect.
John, we often draw on your skills in the diplomatic service to unpick, elucidate the euphemism for us. In your experience, when someone says, I'm leaving to spend more time with my family, what does that usually mean?
It means I've been sacked. But it may not in this case.
Because she's got very young children.
She's got young children.
That is true.
Firstly, yes, it may be genuinely, just because she's Karoline Leavitt doesn't mean she's necessarily lying. And it may be she actually does want to spend time with her children. The other thing is that in standing back from the position of spokesperson, she could well be lining herself up for something else. And I've seen a couple of comments from senior MAGA people talking about, the journey's only just begun. We look forward to her brilliant future, suggesting that there's something going on in the background that is not yet public. We'll have to watch the space.
She did run. Yes, you were about to say. Yes, she ran for Congress 4 years ago. She is only 28.
I know. I couldn't believe and then she was a speechwriter, I think, in Trump's first administration. So, despite her youth, she has actually, had a bit of a footprint in politics before.
I mean, do you think though, Nina, that her there is a lasting influence now on the way the White House is covered, because among the decisions she either made or at least got out in front of was this one of sort of shifting to one side the legacy media, or what she would doubtless call, the crooked fake news media, and filling the White House briefing room up with, internet weirdos.
For sure, and obviously we saw that at the White House. We saw where that leads to at the White House Correspondents' dinner, when obviously the US president was rather aspic, let's put it that way, towards somebody who was a former colleague of mine a few years ago. Who's an equally young and dynamic and very capable woman as well. I think. Obviously, as I was saying before, there'll be lots of people in the press who will not thank Karoline Leavitt for her legacy. There will be a lot of people inside the MAGA movement who say, wow, if you wanted somebody who's going to be a pit bull towards the press, she's good at her job. And the other thing I would say is that, Donald Trump over his 2 administrations has had, he's made a big thing of sort of hiring and very publicly firing lots of his spokespeople. One thinks of Sean Spicer, Anthony Scaramucci, who very famously was fired very, very quickly and has since gone on to make, had a really successful career in the media.
Best thing that ever happened to him.
He says so himself, I suppose. But actually women have stayed the course longer as press secretaries under Donald Trump's time, because I was just looking before at this tenure from Karoline Leavitt. As I said before, it's 20-odd months. Sarah Huckabee Sanders lasted longer than the men as well. So, and then, of course, we've got, other people, Kelly Conway, who may have left the prominent front bench, if you like, at the podium, but actually ended up being important counsellors from the sidelines. And I suspect that may still continue. But no, the press certainly will not thank people like Karoline Leavitt for having worked very much against the way how Washington worked before.
Well, to Finland now, which earlier this year was named by the World Happiness Report the happiest country in the world for the 9th year running. The dream of a decade-long run in top spot may be counterintuitively thwarted, however, by the generosity of Unesco's World Heritage Committee, which has added 13 Finnish buildings, all the work of Alvar Aalto and his successive wives Aino Aalto and Elisa Aalto, to the UNESCO World Heritage List. More from our panel shortly, but first from Helsinki. Here is Monocle's Petri Burtsoff on an accolade which can prove a mixed blessing.
There is little doubt that Unesco's decision to include 13 sites designed by the celebrated Finnish modernist Alvar Aalto as World Heritage is a major win for Finnish design. But turning landmark architecture into World Heritage comes with its own set of challenges that Finland will have to reckon with. World Heritage sites need to be protected and maintained, which costs money. In the case of the Aalto sites, hundreds of millions of euros, of which UNESCO will pay nothing. Then there's the question of access. World Heritage needs to be accessible to the general public, but some of the Aalto sites are private homes or government institutions with locked doors. Finally, should the architects themselves have a say in all of this? Aalto obviously can't, he's 6 feet under, but most architecture historians agree that preservation, freezing them in time so to speak, is the last thing that the great modernist would have wanted for his buildings. Celebrating great design should never mean putting a stop to its story.
Petri Burtsoff in Helsinki, thank you. John, first of all, are you surprised that some of the places which are on the World Heritage List are actively campaigning to get off it?
No, not at all. This is an issue that goes much wider than just UNESCO and the World Heritage List. It's all about heritage as a concept. If you describe something as heritage, you are intrinsically you're freezing it. You are saying, I'm not going to change this, or if I do change it, it has to be in consonance with the existing structure, whatever it is, which immediately sets up all kinds of tensions. I mean, I remember the great furore in Liverpool in 2021 when...
It's one of very few places to have been on the list and then not been on it.
One of only 3 places, I believe. That's correct. And Liverpool said, look, we've got to redevelop the waterfront. We need housing and we need industry, we need jobs. And UNESCO said, if you do that, you're coming off the list. And Liverpool said, we're going ahead. And UNESCO duly remove them. And Liverpool has never actually looked back since then. I mean, it's not difficult to find Liverpoolians to say it was nice to have UNESCO, but the general consensus in the city is that was the right decision. You lose the heritage status? OK, too bad. You've got to move forward. And that is just one that kind of broke surface. I think there are an awful lot of UNESCO heritage sites that would actually like to modernize, like to change, but the weight of carrying the badge of being a UNESCO heritage site is such that they don't want to. They can't.
I found an example of one that's the other end of the spectrum, which is, I will not try and pronounce it. It's in Slovakia, and it's this tiny village of 45, a hamlet of 45 sort of cottages that UNESCO in the 1990s decreed was the ultimate picture box, chocolate box, typical village of Central Eastern Europe, and put it on the list. And it lost 50% of its population in the 3 decades since, and it now only houses 14 people, and 100,000 visitors swarm there every year, and taking pictures through people's front rooms and so on and so forth. So they're trying to get off the list.
Am I right in suspecting a relationship between those two factors, i.e. 100,000 tourists every year and half the population just thinking, nah.
Let's get out of here. Yeah. I mean, you only need to go to the little coloured houses off Portobello Road and Notting Hill to see all the Instagrammers on the front door steps of people's houses, and they're trying to get their children out for the school run or something, and there's somebody posing on their own property. You see it in London a lot, particularly around that area. And I think it speaks to the kind of lack of decorum as well that some tourists have. It's not just a tourism issue, though, as you were just saying before, John. It's also an important development issue, because cities are kind of living and breathing urban places. And if we don't recognise that, then people will move on.
But how, John, to police then those conflicts, which are going to exist, where you have the idea that this, whatever it is of crucial importance to all of humanity, that it is, if you like, global heritage, versus the interests of the people who actually live there?
UNESCO does its best to, I don't know if you'd say police these conflicts, but to offer some kind of rigour or some kind of flexibility. UNESCO is sensitive to the problems that being a heritage site creates. But in the end, it's not so much a question of policing. It's a binary decision. Either you hold on to the heritage or you don't. And there is a bit of grey area in the middle, but not a lot. I think the next one to watch is Venice. We've already seen huge numbers of Venetians leaving the city, just aghast at the mess that tourists make, the noise, the all-night parties, all the stupid things that tourists do. We've got depopulation, bad damage, and a lot of Venetians saying enough. We're charging tourists money to come into the city, but that hasn't really stopped the flow. We've stopped the cruise ships coming in, but we're still overwhelmed. I mean, at what point do we say we're no longer a heritage site, just go away?
If we boil it down to our personal perspectives, Nina, would you want your neighbourhood to be UNESCO World Heritage listed?
Parts of it are a bit of a dumps, quite frankly, in all selfishness maybe, but I don't think it's going to get there, until the convention centre's built nearby. I live in Earls Court, by the way. Probably irritated half of Earls Court by saying that. I don't know. I think these things are well intentioned. That's the problem, isn't it? It's a badge of honour. It's prestige. But the problem is nowadays the world is a lot more interconnected. People want the experience economy. They want the photos of themselves that are picturesque. Mm-hmm. A lot of this is dictated by sort of rather superficial trends. And actually, just to say, I'm still slightly conflicted about this trend, by the way, because I was following everything that happened in Mallorca in the last week with the protests against tourists, and I had been to beautiful Palma de Mallorca a year ago and thankfully missed all of that, and it's wonderful. And then I thought, gosh, it must be UNESCO heritage, it must have loads of UNESCO heritage sites here, and I realised Mallorca only has one, and it's not Palma de Mallorca, it's the mountains. Over-tourism can happen without UNESCO heritage sites as well.
John, just finally, and picking up on what Nina was saying about the fact that picturesque sites, places have always been touristed. There's always been tourists in Venice, for example. But have things like the UNESCO World Heritage List failed to account for the secondary effects caused by having a much more mobile world in many respects and modern social media, which does place a priority on getting the photo, and usually not so much the photo of the thing itself, but the photo of you standing in front of it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's instructed to look back at the start of the UNESCO Heritage Site scheme. In the initial documents, they hardly mention tourism. I mean, and there only in the sense of the damage that tourists might do to the sites. The phenomenon of mass tourism, which we now observe, just wasn't around at the time. This is a scheme that simply wandered forward in time, has been tinkered at round the edges, but hasn't really adapted to the modern world, and it's a bit of a headache.
John Everard and Nina Dos Santos, thank you both for joining us. That is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Today's show was produced by Hassan Anderson and researched by Kaylee Martin. Our sound engineer was Christy O'Grady. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time tomorrow. Thanks for listening.